Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of our If You Had One Wish podcast. So I'm Crystal Hicks and today I'm delighted to be joined by a new co-host. We have Helen Scott. So Helen, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Helen, as Crystal said. I am Chair of Wish in the North West region and I am currently Head of Programmes at Riverside and just super passionate about making the most out of opportunities for women in social housing.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining us, Helen.
Thank
it's
you.
Lovely to have a fellow Northerner on the podcast. So lovely to have you with us. I'm so excited by today's guest. We are joined by the wonderful Elly Hoult. So Elly is a familiar face in the housing sector. She's been a leading figure for, many years. She's currently Chief Operating Officer and Deputy Chief Exec of Peabody, as well as the President of the Chartered Institute of Housing, having also served on the board as a governing board member. So Elly is a true housing professional. She's got a master's degree in housing and has worked at some of the sector's best known housing organisations, including Notting Hill Genesis Orbit Group and A2 Dominion Group. Elly has informed me, but I know this already, that she's a keen advocate for women working and living in social housing, and she's choosing to champion the sector as a career of choice in her Choose Housing presidential campaign, which I'm sure we're going to talk about quite a bit on today's podcast. So the campaign is really seeking to raise awareness of the vast and varied career opportunities there are in the housing sector. So welcome, Elly. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here.
To have you. So let's get stuck into our questions. And Elly, we've got so much we want to ask you about. So in these podcast conversations, we're wanting to really hear about sort of the experiences of female leaders and change makers like yourself. And that's really just so our listeners can appreciate your journey, the challenges you've been on, how you've overcome them, and the lessons that we could maybe learn from your experiences. So as such, can I ask you really about your career journey? Would you mind giving us a little bit of a potted history about what brought you into social housing and what's made you stay?
Absolutely. So I actually fell into social housing almost by accident. I grew up in a council house myself, and after leaving school at 16 to start work, I took a job as an administrator at a small housing association called Cherwell Housing Trust in Oxford. And at that time, I knew nothing about housing other than I lived in a house. But I quickly became hooked, and hearing the stories and seeing the impact of the work, particularly in supported housing where I cut my teeth, was eye-opening. I genuinely saw lives being transformed, young mums being empowered, vulnerable care leavers finding stability. And I realised how deeply meaningful housing was. And that initial experience made me see housing as a vocation, not just as a job. Over the years, what's kept me in this sector is that sense of purpose. Housing touches every part of people's lives. It's important for stability, it's important for dignity, for opportunity, for health, for life chances. And I've stayed because it's a sector where I can help drive real change. And that is such a privilege in my role now, whether that's supporting individuals or leading transformation projects, or now a very lucky position as the president of the Chartered Institute of Housing. So, yeah, I fell into housing, I fell in love with it, and I continue to be in love with housing.
Thanks, Elly. I think the question I had for you is, obviously as a very experienced leader, female leader, you will have faced challenges and seen the sector change over the past few years. What do you think are the biggest challenges that you've faced and that you've overcome, and what lessons are there for the rest of us that might be interested to learn?
So one of the biggest challenges I've faced as a female leader has been overcoming self-doubt and the sense of not being good enough, something I still struggle with today. Earlier in my career, I didn't have formal academic qualifications, and I often felt inferior compared to others who did, which of course was probably all in my own head. But that lack of confidence could have held me back. But I tried to focus on learning and developing and proving to myself that I could achieve just as much. I'm not a competitive person, but I'm competitive with myself and I push myself quite hard. Another challenge has been navigating a sector that, whilst improving, hasn't always been as inclusive or diverse as it could be. And there is still work to do in this area. As a woman in leadership, there were times when I had to work harder to have my voice heard or to be taken seriously. And that's literally to have my voice heard at a meeting room, as well as have my voice heard metaphorically. The lessons I've taken from these experiences is that authenticity and resilience are really powerful tools. I've always stayed true to my values. I come from a long line of shop stewards, and I certainly couldn't look my mum in the face if I wasn't true to my values. So that's important, but also surrounding yourself with allies and mentors who support you. I think if I could give some advice to my younger self, it would be, don't let fear or self-doubt hold you back. You don't need to have all the answers. You don't need to tick every box. Experience isn't just about longevity. Experience is about what you bring to the table and the lens at which you look through. And I often talk to young people about this now, how their experience is so important. Hearing from young people have a completely different experience to somebody that's been in the sector for as long as I have. So to young professionals, my advice would be to seek out opportunities and be open to learning from failures, because they are as valuable as successes. But I think most importantly is probably not to underestimate the impact that people can make. I would say be brave, and you'd be surprised at what you can achieve.
Thank you, Elly. I think what really strikes me is I've been involved with Wish for 7-8 years now, and I've had the privilege to speak to many a female leader in the sector to understand like the journey that they've been on and what insight can glean from that to help, women coming up behind them. And I've yet to hear one woman not say that they faced barriers because they were a woman in coming up. And I think, I don't know why that shocks me. I just assume that, yes, maybe some of us have faced some barriers, but actually, the more women I speak to, the more it sounds like this is just everybody. This is just what happens to women who are coming into positions of leadership, that those challenges around having your voice heard and trying to carve a path for yourself. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah, the more we share it and the more we acknowledge it, the more that, everybody is aware of it and we can do something and think about it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I think that is exacerbated when there is other intersectionalities at play. So if you're a Black woman, if you have caring responsibilities, if you're a lesbian, those things exacerbate, I don't know if that's the right word, but the barriers that you face in the workplace. I feel like I have a role now to try and remove as many of those barriers as I can. But the point I'm constantly making at the moment, which feels like a new thing actually in the last sort of 5 years, this point around allyship, is that I cannot be the person that is always dealing with sexism in the workplace. It needs to be men as well, need to be there. They need to be anti-sexist. They need to be helping to remove those barriers and other barriers as well. And I think workplaces are becoming much more sophisticated in their thinking around that now, but there's quite a long way to go on that.
Yeah, and we can't take for granted the fact that that's a progressive journey either. I think we've seen, not to get political, but we have seen, the political environment change or some of the narrative around this. And yeah, I think even as you say, more and more, we need those allies to come forward and be quite explicit externally about the fact that they are allies in this, because it does feel like a real battle at times at the moment. I wanted to pick on something you said around fear and self-doubt. So throughout our professional and personal careers, opportunities come our way, and sometimes, we go through the doors that open to us and sometimes we don't. I suppose, are there any doors that you'd wished you'd gone through or opportunities you wished you'd taken that maybe fear, self-doubt or other reasons had led you not to take up those opportunities?
So honestly, I don't have any doors that I regret not pushing. I've always believed that every experience, whether it works out as planned or not, shapes you. What you don't see when you see me in this role is the many roles that I've gone for and not gotten. And there are quite a few. And each of those moments was tough at the time, but I've always made a point of learning from the feedback and using it to develop those experiences. You know, taught me to be resilient, the importance of self-reflection, and ultimately, you know, helped me to land in roles that align with my values and goals. So often I've gone for roles that I thought actually I wouldn't have wanted to have done that anyway. There are others that I've really wanted or maybe not been ready for. Some that I wanted and was just unlucky on the day. There was, you know, better candidate that day. So, but all of those experiences and setbacks have sort of shaped me. So I am quite a positive person. And it's about making the most of those opportunities and finding sort of fulfillment in the journey rather than focusing on what could have been. And that's worked out really, really well for me.
Yeah, I think that's such valuable advice, Ellie. I think it's so easy to focus on, well, I'm not good enough for that, or I didn't get that. And as women particularly, I think you do internalise a lot of why you may not have been successful in a role. I think even hearing that someone that's gone on to your success rather, has those challenges is quite refreshing. Although you know through your own lived experience, you forget sometimes that does happen to everybody. And just because you're in the, you know, the positions that you've got now doesn't mean you haven't faced those sort of setbacks previously. I think that's really sound advice and really timely to remind people that there is, as you say, depth in the journey, not it just being a really pleasant experience every time. I think that's a lovely and refreshing thing to hear. Okay, so thanks, Ellie. I think now if we can spend some time talking about your Choose Housing campaign. Why did you go with that theme, and what do you want people to do differently as a result of that?
So the Choose Housing campaign is deeply personal to me. I've seen firsthand how life-changing this sector can be, not just for our residents, but also for people who work in it, and many of our residents work in our organisations as well. I chose this theme because more often actually than not, housing as a career isn't seen as a first choice. So the phrase "I fell into housing" I hear a lot, rather than people actively choosing it. And it's really important to me that we start to think about how we change that narrative. It is such a unique sector. It offers the opportunity to make a difference, whether that's through working directly in our neighbourhoods with our residents, whether that's in leadership roles, whether you're a caretaker, whether you're a coder, whether you work in HR, whether you're a care worker. The roles are extensive, but many people just simply don't know what a career in housing can offer. And I think especially younger people, we need to encourage more younger people into the sector and those with lived experience of social housing, because they bring invaluable insight into the work that we do. So through this campaign, I want to start to change the narrative. I want people to see housing as a vibrant, impactful and inclusive sector where they can thrive. And I want people to actively consider housing as a career of choice. For organisations, I think it's important that we recruit, support and develop diverse talent. And, you know, I've talked about my own, you know, whether you're qualified or not, whether you're black or white, whether you're male or female, whether you're gay or straight. I do hope that this campaign will inspire some pride and encourage people to share their stories and the incredible work that I know that we do every day, and that I see every day. So I think it's something I'm really passionate about. But one of the main things about this campaign is I'm only president for 1 year, and this can't be for 1 year. This needs to be something that it's not my campaign. This is the sector's campaign. And if I achieve that through the next, I think I've got about 10 months left, it's flying by already, then I will have done something that, you know, something good that we can get hold of and continue to bring the people in that we desperately need.
Thanks, Ellie. I think the CH presidential campaigns are brilliant, but gosh, they're over quick, aren't they? So, yes, let's talk about that a little bit more, get into a bit more detail around choosing housing as a career. When I've heard people say, oh, I just fell into housing, often what they go on to say is, I didn't know that this was sort of an industry, a sector. And I personally think a lot of that is because it's not professionalised. So like when I talk to my girls about what they might want to be when they grow up, they talk about being a teacher or an engineer or even a fashion designer, because there's a professional route around that. But housing has lacked that maybe in terms of professionalism. So it feels like professionalism and actually choosing it as a career go hand in hand. But I'm interested to know what you think about that. So, CIH have been quite clear on professionalism being a must for those working in the sector. So why do you think it's important, I suppose? Why do you think it's important? And do you think there are some challenges around the whole professionalisation agenda?
So I became a professional almost as soon as I came into housing. It was one of the first things I did. So for me, it's always been important. It's unfortunate, I think, that it's not mandated in the same way that it is in other professions such as RICS. So I think that now that the government is bringing this agenda forward, I'm really excited about it because of the increasing complexities and challenges that we face, which are a lot different from when I first started. The role is much more complex. It's about delivering services that impact health and well-being and opportunities. So with that level of responsibility comes a need for really high standards, consistent skills, and a commitment to ethical practice. It's vital to help us build trust with our communities, and we know we've lost trust with our communities and with external stakeholders and regulators as well. I think it's about ensuring that residents know that they're safe, that we have the expertise and capability to tackle the big challenges such as, building safety, sustainability. We've got climate change coming at us like a high-speed train. But we do need to ensure that there is equal access to training across organisations of all sizes, including small, large, medium housing providers. And we need to address the perception gap. So I think another challenge around creating a culture of professionalism is that it's not just about qualifications, and that is so important. I meet neighbourhood managers every day who are fantastic, who are not necessarily qualified, but they are brilliant neighbourhood managers. And vice versa. And I think it's the same as a nurse. You would want a really well qualified nurse, but you would also want them to be caring and have the values and the ethics that underpin that role. So you need both to work together. So balancing that sort of technical skills with people-centred approach, I think, is the way forward, because ultimately it's about ensuring that everybody, regardless of their role, has the skills and knowledge to deliver the best outcomes for our residents. I think it's really important, and it couldn't have come at a more timely point, really. So I'm really supportive of the government's approach on this.
Thank you. I think that's really insightful. And I think we absolutely cannot lose sight of the fact that, with all the qualifications in the world, it's still not going to make you empathetic. It's still not going to make you passionate about the people that you're serving in communities. And we need to find a way that character, motivation, values are just as important as competencies, qualifications, and the knowledge part of it. So thank you for reminding us of that.
So one final question for you, which we ask all of our podcast guests. If you had one wish for the sector, what would that be and why?
If I had one wish, it would be for the sector to have the funding and resources it genuinely needs to truly tackle the housing crisis. 1 in 23 children in our capital city are living in temporary accommodation. And that is a statistic that we should all be deeply concerned and ashamed of as a country. And to tackle it, we need to build more genuinely affordable homes. We've got this target of 1.5 million, which is fantastic. They need to be the right homes in the right places. In London, we need family homes. We don't just need flats. We need to improve our existing homes as well as building new ones. And we need to invest in sustainability. I'm really proud to work in housing, but it has become really hard to deliver all of the things that we need to deliver with the funding that we've got. And housing associations do so much with limited resources, and we do so many things in communities, and we advice and wellbeing and training and support, as well as providing homes, but we're constantly caught in that challenging space. So adequate funding would, and really seeing housing as a priority, genuinely seeing housing as a priority, would allow us to take the bold and the innovative steps that we need to build more inclusive communities for the future. So it's a big wish, but it would solve so many problems. It would introduce jobs, it would give people better life chances, it would cut costs in the NHS. For me, it's a complete no-brainer. So I'm hoping that if there's anybody who's a decision maker listening to this, that they'll take that on board and go away and find us a little bit more money to deliver what we need to.
Amen to that, Elly. I'll add somebody at the Treasury and get them to give us a listen. And look, that your wish can be whatever you want, no matter how bold or audacious. That's what we need, a bit of vision. So thank you. And thank you so much for being our podcast guest today. It's been brilliant to get to know you a little bit better, and to hear from you and get your insights. So thank you, Elly, and thank you, Helen, for co-hosting today. It's been a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to the If I Had One Wish podcast. Next time, we'll be talking to another inspirational female from the housing sector, who will be sharing her career story on what she's learned along the way. And of course, we'll be asking again the big question: if she had one wish, what would it be and why? See you next time.